Hey, how's it going? It's me, Lex, back again. Today I'm doing sort of a review of Starfinder 2nd edition. This is going to be covering several of the books all in one video. I've worked on putting this review together like 4, 5, 6 times. I put tens of hours into writing scripts or doing one-shot recordings, stuff like that, and I just haven't been able to find a satisfying take, but I really want to get something out, so this is going to be it. No matter how this ends up being, there's just going to be some Minecraft gameplay in the background, playing the raspberry flavored mod pack. But what I'm going to be covering today will be the Starfinder 2nd edition player core, GM core, the Deluxe Adventure Pack, and Murder in Metal City, with the asterisk that specifically Murder in Metal City I have only read through, I have not run, but the others I have run either in part or in full. And then the system as a whole, I've read all of the books, and I read the playtest. This is going to be a review of the full release. The reason that this has been such a challenge for me to put together properly has been because I've had some very sort of mixed feelings about the entire project, or well, system I should say, and I've been trying to find the right way to put that all together, but the main sort of thesis that I want to lead with, because I think it's the most important bit to understand to get what I'm going to be trying to focus on here, is that I think that Starfinder 2nd edition needed to be different than Pathfinder 2nd edition, and the playtest seemed like it was going in that direction. It was doing a lot of things that broke Pathfinder 2nd edition design conventions, but for whatever reason, between the playtest and the full release, they walked back a lot of those changes. And it seems like the reason a lot of them were walked back was so that Starfinder and Pathfinder 2nd edition would be more identical systems. They'd achieve more system parity. Some of the more outstanding examples that I've seen some people point out are things like the fly spell still being a 4th rank spell, even though access to flight is within the Starfinder 2nd edition system far less restricted and exclusive. You can start with it with several ancestries. There are consumables and equipment that give you flight at lower levels. The whole system is sort of set up with ranged combat and alien stuff in mind, so flight is more accessible, and yet the fly spell is the exact same level as it is in Pathfinder. I've seen this also be described as like maybe, oh, it's a lore reason, the spell remains the same rank, things like that, but it's tiny things like that that just feel off, and feel like they're sort of missing some of what could make Starfinder more interesting. And then the more overarching issues that I've had, and these are things that I've voiced in some of my prior videos, was that there were some improvements that I really liked that got walked back. Casters had their focus spells granted to them at certain levels instead of being tied to feats, and I complimented this greatly throughout the playtest period. I think it's a great way to make spellcasters, and specifically their subclasses, feel more unique, make them fit better into Pathfinder 2nd edition's sort of, I guess I should say the Paizo 2nd edition's core design philosophy of attritionless adventuring days. And they walked it back, presumably either out of the thought of, well, this is just making casters stronger, or because it's not how it's done in Pathfinder, and they wanted to achieve system parity. There's no way to know either of those for sure, but it was a thing that I thought was good for the system, a change from the norm, and it got walked back for no discernible positive reason. There are similar issues I've voiced and I've found before about things like, for example, the ranged combat meta that Pathfinder or Starfinder 2nd Edition is trying to cultivate incentivizes dexterity as essentially a hidden key statistic for everyone, which I think leads to very dull character building. Attributes are meant to represent, trade-offs, so that one character can't be great at everything. And yet, in making guns so readily accessible and fitting to the setting, a lot of people want guns, and so you might as well pick up dexterity, especially because unless you're a strength-based class, your dexterity is also going to benefit your armor class, it benefits your reflex saves. They've created a dex meta again, and that's not something that I'm a huge fan of. Ranged damage feeling incredibly lackluster because it's still balanced around the idea of no flat bonuses. It's a bunch of very small things that I vocalized that I wish got changed in the playtest, that never did, or that I liked in the playtest because they were changes from Pathfinder's core that they've walked back. And I think that overall it's made the game less appealing as it's moved from playtest to full release. There are smaller things like specific implementations of things like the Envoy's directives. I preferred how they were handled in the playtest, but that in particular is just personal preference. I preferred the more versatile nature of using a directive and being able to strengthen it later instead of just having it be a single ability. But that's neither here nor there. The main critique is just that I think Starfinder was a great opportunity to sort of abandon some of the design shackles of the Pathfinder 2nd Edition system that make certain aspects of it underwhelming or uninteresting or not gel as thoroughly as it could with some of the design principles that the Paizo 2nd Edition engine wants to take up. The attritionless casting was a primary sort of focus that I had a minute ago, where having casters have access to their focus spells at earlier levels, and automatically as they level up, I should say, not at earlier levels, but they gain their additional spells automatically and increase their pool, added to the feeling that every class was sort of equal in its engagement with the attrition system, and it again made the different subclasses feel more distinct from one another. But all that got walked back, presumably to maintain exact one-to-one comparisons between the systems. It focused on parity over balance, and interesting design. So I found it very difficult to get excited about Starfinder 2nd Edition. Every time I look at some of the new stuff that's coming out, or I consider running or playing some of it, or I have run and played it before, I'm just left with what feels like obvious design holes that I can point at and that were easy enough to patch but they didn't get patched because it needed to stick to an invisible rule book that contradicts what it wants to do, or what it could do that would be better. And that's a disappointing feeling to have for a system. Moving on a little bit from that, because that's my core difficulty with the Starfinder system. But moving into specific adventures, Murder in Metal City seems to be a lot better than the Playtest adventures. I had some major critiques of the Playtest adventures, mostly centered around the fact that they didn't seem to be organized as proper playtest adventures. They weren't great at playtesting things, and they were as unpolished as I would expect a playtest product to be. Some of the maps didn't match up. Some of the enemy encounters were quite unbalanced, things like that. Overall, I'd say it'll do, but like some of the worse Paizo APs, you might have more luck if you focus on sort of using it as a baseline and modifying it, rather than trying to run it straight, like some of the better Paizo APs are capable of doing. And then finally, I have sort of a critique about the way that the entire Starfinder release cycle has gone. This is something that I've talked with a few people more knowledgeable than me about, but it's still a critique that I feel is worthwhile having and putting out, which is that the way that the system was advertised as it was in development and coming out, it was very much advertised as this is going to be its own system. It'll be compatible with Pathfinder, but it is not a Pathfinder expansion. And now that the system has come out, I just don't feel like that was an accurate way to advertise the system. And more particularly, perhaps more helpfully, advertising it in that way, I think, set a lot of expectations for the game that were unhealthy for it and the way it was handled. Like, for example, if you view Starfinder 2nd Edition completely as its own system, you're not relying on anything else to make it function, then it was an incomplete system, and still is, to an extent, for the first several months of its lifespan. The Alien Archive book still isn't out, which means that there are no creatures to pull from for running your adventures, which is only a kind of issue, which is why I bring it up there. But there was this not insignificant sort of gap between when the Starfinder player core came out and the Starfinder GM core came out, where it was impossible to run the game unless you were running a pre-built adventure or were pulling from Pathfinder. And that just didn't strike me as something that a system touting itself as its own system should be suffering from. If a system wants to be standalone and say that it functions as its own and has its own identity, then it should function as such. You should be able to buy the books that are released and play it. So that was just a minor sort of like business end critique. And as I said, I know that there are complications with like release schedules and stuff like that that make things like this hard for larger products like Paizo products. You know, a TTRPG that has all of its rules in one book doesn't suffer from this issue, but it was an issue I ran into nonetheless, where if you're going to release a game, it should be fully playable on its release, I feel. And that was just something that, alongside the other issues, ended up sticking in my mouth as a bad taste. As for where this is going to leave Starfinder content in the future regarding my channel, I'll probably still end up covering anything that does interest me in particular. Maybe I'll put together a Technomancer or mechanic combat demonstration. But as far as sort of splitting it off into being a secondary focus for the channel, unfortunately the playtest just did not live up to that desire for me, and Starfinder content is going to be supplementary at best, which is a shame, but it's how I feel about the system, and not only how I'll integrate it into my games, but how I'm going to integrate it into my Pathfinder channel. Although I want to shift more towards tabletop role-playing games in general. I have already kind of started that move with various system insights and reviews. I have a bunch of things on the mind about, I've been playing and reading the Hollows TTRPG by Rowan Rook and Descartes. I have a bunch of thoughts about entity design there, hollow design there. I like a lot of their mechanics and want to talk about them. So that's probably a video that you'll end up seeing at some point or another. And I got a whole bunch of other TTRPGs on the docket that are maybe a little more obscure, a little more strange, more abstract concepts that I want to talk about. But I think that leaves us finished for the day as far as Starfinder goes, which is to say, I do really appreciate the opportunity to get into Starfinder, to read some of the books, to get early access to some of them with review copies and things like that. But it's just left a sour taste in my mouth, the design direction that it's gone, sort of enforcing the Pathfinder 2nd edition design principles over doing its own thing. And I think it's done that to its own decent detriment, and it makes me not super interested in covering the system anymore. So, yeah. Thank you all for watching. I want to hear your thoughts down below, if you have any. Please don't take this as, an attack on the authors or anything like that. I'm not saying it's a terrible system or that no one can have fun with it. It's just, I feel like it could have been something better. And I feel like I saw that something better, but it was abandoned in favor of keeping things sort of all in one envelope when it comes to Pathfinder 2nd edition compatibility, and specifically parity. So, yeah. As far as channel updates go, I have a small announcement to make. After the next video, I'm not going to be reading out supporters' names anymore. I will be including them still as some opening text at the start of a video, as opposed to the end of the video here with the shoutouts. I've just found that when I'm trying to record footage, or record anything, write down a script, having this sort of obligatory moment at the end has felt kind of odd, because it's it feels strange to take a break and come back from that break that I need to, not get burnt out, and then read out a whole bunch of people who have been supporting me, because I appreciate the heck out of it, and always will, in ways that I can't really put into words, but having to read out the names at the end feels strange in a sort of like, here's all the people who were sitting around waiting for me kind of way, and I have to fit that into every video or every script. But like I said, this will be a change coming after the next video, so that there's opportunity for anyone who really was in it for the readouts to pull out. I don't want to be unfair or anything like that. But thank you so much for supporting the channel. We have Taran, Phoenix FH, Kizo, Max Magnus 20019, and a new addition in Ziggy _ 1031. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel, watching the videos, waiting for my very slow release schedule. I'm hoping to pick things up as I can get into more sort of projects and change the direction of the channel towards more general TTRPG thoughts and advice and points. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed and have a good night. Thank you. See ya. See ya.